This show is part of OnePlace, a daily network of focused briefings across the stories people follow most.
Welcome to the briefing. We are diving into a high-stakes rescue mission in Iran and the shifting political landscape in Washington. Let's get you caught up on the latest developments right now.
A daring U.S. rescue mission saves a downed airman.
Trump confirms the colonel is safe after being hunted.
The shoot-down challenges claims of total U.S. air superiority.
President Trump considers a major cabinet reshuffle amid war.
U.S. officials arrest relatives of the late General Soleimani.
The administration fights to continue White House ballroom construction.
Critics highlight past claims of annihilated Iranian air defenses.
A 48-hour deadline looms for the Hormuz Strait.
First, the rescue mission. The U.S. military has successfully completed what President Trump is calling one of the most daring search and rescue operations in history. A U.S. Air Force colonel, whose F-15 fighter jet was shot down over southern Iran on Friday, has been recovered and is now safe and sound. This mission was a race against time, as Iranian forces were also scouring the treacherous mountainous terrain to locate the missing crew member. The colonel was the second of two crew members to be rescued. The first was picked up shortly after the initial crash. President Trump shared on social media that the airman was being hunted by enemies who were closing in by the hour, but senior officials monitored his location around the clock to ensure the rescue's success.
The complexity of this combat search and rescue mission cannot be overstated. It involved dozens of aircraft flying deep into Iranian territory. While the president claimed the operation resulted in no American casualties, there are reports of significant engagement between U.S. and Iranian forces during the extraction. The pilot reportedly suffered injuries during his initial ejection from the F-15, which adds another layer of difficulty to a high-altitude mountain rescue. Iranian state media has countered the U.S. narrative, claiming that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps managed to shoot down a U.S. drone that was participating in the search. This highlights the intense, direct military friction occurring within Iranian borders, as both nations scrambled to reach the downed airman first, in a highly volatile environment.
Next, more on the aircraft. New details are emerging about the sheer scale of the aircraft deployment used to retrieve the colonel. President Trump noted on Truth Social that the military sent dozens of aircraft armed with lethal weaponry to ensure the officer's safety. However, the mission was not without its own losses. A U.S. official revealed that 3 of the rescue aircraft were actually hit by Iranian fire during the low-altitude operation. One of these was an A-10 Warthog, which was damaged but managed to reach Kuwaiti airspace before the pilot was forced to eject and was subsequently rescued. Additionally, 2 helicopters were struck by Iranian fire but were able to limp back to their base. This suggests that Iranian air defenses remain a potent threat despite the administration's previous claims of total air dominance.
The geolocation of social media footage has provided a clearer picture of where these events unfolded. Videos showed American search and rescue aircraft flying over the Khuzestan province, specifically near a bridge about 100 miles inland. This confirms the deep penetration of U.S. assets into Iranian territory. The fact that 2 fighter jets have been shot down in such a short window is a significant milestone, marking the first such losses in over 20 years. While the president maintains that the U.S. has achieved overwhelming air superiority, analysts are pointing to these recent shootdowns as evidence that the Iranian military still possesses the capability to challenge U.S. operations. The injuries sustained by the colonel and the damage to the rescue fleet underscore the high risks currently faced by American pilots.
Now, the strategic implications. The downing of the F-15 Eagle is being viewed as a significant blow to Washington's narrative regarding the war. For weeks, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and President Trump have insisted that Iran's air defenses were essentially neutralized. This incident proves that Iran can still defend its skies, even if only in a limited capacity. The stakes were incredibly high during the search, as the capture of a high-ranking U.S. officer would have provided Iran with a massive propaganda victory. The Iranian government was even offering a $66,000 reward to locals for the capture of the airman. This situation brought back dark memories of the 1979 hostage crisis, a historical event that still leaves deep political scars in the United States and influences how the current administration handles such crises.
Privately, the White House is reportedly very concerned about these developments, even as the president publicly downplays the impact on potential negotiations with Tehran. The history of prisoner swaps, such as the controversial exchange for Bo Bergdahl in 2014, creates a difficult political landscape for Trump. If the colonel had been captured, the pressure to escalate the military conflict would have been immense. Critics often argue that any concessions made to secure the release of service members only incentivize future hostage-taking. By successfully executing this rescue, the administration avoided a nightmare scenario that could have forced their hand into a much larger war. However, the reality that Iran was able to shoot down a sophisticated jet remains a troubling fact that the national security team must now address in their future planning.
Moving to Washington politics. President Trump is reportedly considering a major cabinet shakeup as he faces mounting pressure from the ongoing war with Iran. Following the recent removal of Attorney General Pam Bondi, sources suggest that more high-level changes could be on the horizon. The 5-week-old conflict has had a tangible impact on the domestic front, driving up gas prices and causing a dip in the president's approval ratings. With the midterm elections approaching in November, there's a growing sense of anxiety among Republicans about the political fallout. Some officials believe that a reshuffling of the cabinet could serve as a necessary reset for the administration. While no single member is guaranteed to lose their job, the atmosphere in the West Wing is described as increasingly frustrated with the current direction of both messaging and military strategy.
Among those potentially on the chopping block are Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence, and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. Trump has reportedly expressed displeasure with Gabbard in recent months, and he has been asking allies for their thoughts on potential replacements. Meanwhile, Lutnick is facing renewed scrutiny over his past relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, specifically a 2012 lunch on Epstein's private island. Although Lutnick claims the meeting was incidental, high-profile Trump allies are privately pushing for his removal. The White House has officially stated that the president maintains total confidence in his team, but the internal dynamics suggest otherwise. A shakeup is often used as a tool to project action and control, and with the war dragging on, the president may feel that a change in personnel is the only way to shift the narrative.
Next, a legal arrest. The U.S. State Department has announced the arrest of the niece and grandniece of the late Iranian general Qasem Soleimani. Hamideh Soleimani Afshar and her daughter, Serena Sadat Hosseini, were taken into custody by ICE after their lawful permanent residence status was revoked by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. The government alleges that Soleimani Afshar's asylum claim was fraudulent, citing 4 trips she made back to Iran since receiving her green card. Officials also claim she has been an outspoken supporter of the Iranian regime and has promoted propaganda on social media. This move is a significant escalation in the administration's efforts to target individuals with ties to the Iranian leadership living within the United States. Both women are currently pending removal from the country as the administration tightens its grip on domestic security concerns related to the war.
In response, Soleimani's daughter, Narges Soleimani, has vehemently denied these claims, stating that the arrested individuals have no connection to her father. She characterized the U.S. actions as a sign of weakness and accused the State Department of fabricating lies against a great figure. Despite these denials, the Department of Homeland Security provided details on the women's immigration history, noting that they originally entered the U.S. on tourist and student visas in 2015. The revocation of their status and the subsequent arrests highlight the intense scrutiny being applied to Iranian nationals in the U.S. during this conflict. The State Department has declined to provide further comment, but the message is clear. The administration is willing to use immigration law as a tool of foreign policy and national security against those it deems linked to Tehran.
Now, White House construction. The Trump administration is currently locked in a legal battle over the construction of a $400 million ballroom at the White House. A federal judge recently ordered a halt to the project, concluding that the president likely lacks the authority to proceed without congressional approval. In response, the National Park Service has filed a motion asking an appeals court to pause that ruling, arguing that stopping construction creates a grave national security risk. The filing emphasizes that time is of the essence because the project includes the installation of heavy fortifications, bomb shelters, and a medical facility. The administration contends that these features are essential for the safety of the president, his family, and his staff. This legal tug-of-war highlights the tension between executive power and the role of Congress in overseeing major federal projects.
Judge Richard Leon, who issued the initial pause, acknowledged the logistical issues of halting an ongoing project, but remained unconvinced by the government's private national security briefings. He specifically exempted any work necessary for immediate safety, allowing underground bunkers to continue. However, the broader ballroom project remains in limbo. President Trump has lashed out at the ruling, though he has pledged that he and private donors will cover the costs of the ballroom itself, while taxpayers fund the security measures. The project has already involved the demolition of parts of the East Wing, making the halt particularly disruptive. The administration's appeal argues that the president has complete authority over the White House grounds, a claim that preservationist groups are fighting in court. This case could set a major precedent for how much control a president has over the historic residence.
Next, the media reaction. CNN host Abby Phillip recently aired a montage of clips that has put the administration's previous claims about Iran's military capabilities under the microscope. The reel featured President Trump, Pete Hegseth, and Caroline Leavitt all asserting that the U.S. had achieved total air dominance and that Iran's radar and anti-aircraft systems were completely annihilated. These statements, made just weeks ago, stand in stark contrast to the reality of two U.S. warplanes being shot down on a single Friday. National security analysts point out that while major radar systems might be degraded, shoulder-fired missiles and residual ground threats remain a constant danger to aircraft. This discrepancy between the administration's rhetoric and the events on the ground has sparked a heated debate about whether the U.S. underestimated Iran's resilience and the true cost of the ongoing air campaign.
The human cost of the conflict was also highlighted, with at least 13 U.S. service members and over 1,900 Iranians having lost their lives so far. Phillips' program emphasized that the downing of the F-15 and the A-10 represents a major escalation, especially given the risk of pilots being captured. The analyst on the show explained that even if the big systems are taken out, the residual threat from the ground can still hit targets up to 10,000 feet away. This technical reality seems to have been glossed over in the administration's public briefings. As the war continues, the pressure on the White House to provide a more accurate assessment of the risks is growing. The montage serves as a reminder of how quickly the situation on the ground can change, challenging even the most confident military pronouncements.
Finally, the looming deadline. President Trump has issued a menacing reminder to Iran regarding the April 6th deadline to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. In a Truth Social post, he warned that time is running out and that all hell will rain down on them in 48 hours if a deal is not made. The Strait of Hormuz is a critical global shipping lane, handling about a fifth of the world's oil and natural gas. Iran effectively shut it down in response to U.S. and Israeli strikes, causing global energy prices to skyrocket. Trump had previously threatened to obliterate Iran's power plants, starting with the largest ones, if the strait remained closed. He had briefly paused this threat to allow for negotiations, but his latest message suggests that his patience has reached its limit as the deadline fast approaches.
The president's rhetoric has intensified, ending his post with the phrase, "Glory be to God," and emphasizing the lethal consequences of noncompliance. This 48-hour window puts the global economy on edge, as any further military action against Iranian infrastructure could lead to even higher oil prices and a broader regional conflict. The closure of the strait has already created significant economic pressure worldwide, which is a major factor in the political challenges Trump is facing at home. By setting such a firm and public deadline, the president has left little room for diplomatic maneuvering. If Iran does not blink, the U.S. may be committed to a massive escalation of force. The world is now watching closely to see if this ultimatum will lead to a breakthrough or a devastating new phase of the war.
That wraps up our briefing for today. Thank you for joining us for these critical updates.
Be sure to follow us for your next daily briefing on the stories that matter most. We will see you back here tomorrow.